Okay, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on my time on my computer, so if I could begin. So thank you all for coming along to this presentation for Electrical Safety Week in September. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that welcome, of course, to any First Nations people joining us online and wherever you are. So I do see some familiar names on the attendees list. So for those who don't know me, I'm Peggy Chung. I'm the Executive Director at NT WorkSafe. In that role, I'm also the electrical safety regulator in the electrical safety legislation that came into force on 1 July 2024. So today's presentation is aimed at really the public or general consumers of electricity, if I can say that. And what I hope to cover in today's session is just a very quick purpose and key features of the Act. I note that I did deliver some presentations prior to July that would, for those who may have attended, would be familiar with some of the matters I will raise. The focus really is on how the new legislation is targeted at ensuring electrical work is done safely to ensure the safety of people, consumers of electricity, as well as workers in that industry, and as much as possible protect people from harm and prevent damage to property. The legislation is quite large, and so are the regulations, even bigger. But they do really hopefully bring the NT up to speed with the regulation of electrical entities, devices, equipment, and licensed workers with the other Australian jurisdictions. So, without further ado, we'll move on to purpose and key features. So again, the purpose, of course, is to prevent injuries or death from electricity to people, everyone, consumer and workers in the industry alike, and also prevent property damage or destruction as a result of electricity. It is anything that can cause a injury or death or property damage is seen as an electrical risk, and the legislation is designed to eliminate or minimise electrical risk, or at least for people to do everything they can to ensure that these things don't happen. Key features, of course, consolidates the Electrical Safety Act and licensing laws prior to 1 July. The licensing of electrical workers and electrical contractors rest with the Electrical Workers and Contractors Board that no longer exist, and all licensing of electrical workers now resides with the regulator at NT WorkSafe. It also creates legal obligations for anyone that works in or can be affected by electricity, and that duty, broadly speaking, is to make sure that everyone or anyone that comes into contact or uses or work with electrical and electricity stay safe and as much as possible. And there's primary duty to make sure that electrical work is done without electrical risk, but there are also specific duty that attaches to designer of electrical equipment, manufacturers, installers and the like, all that is set in the Act and the regulations. And then, of course, it seeks to modernise the licensing and regulation. Again, that's to promote safety and also to ensure that people that work in the electrical industry, which can be dangerous and a split second of energized or working live can lead to drastic and tragic consequences. So we want to make sure that the people who are working in that area are properly trained and properly licensed. So there are three particular license types, and the regulation sets out the different classes of licenses. And all of this was, of course, developed from feedback to a working party many years ago when there was a review and a scoping out of what the electrical industry required. Also, it supports a mutual recognition scheme for electrical workers from interstate to be able to work in the territory, again, provided they're properly licensed interstate. It also adopts a national scheme for safety requirements for electrical goods. These means that if you have that particular tick or mark on the electrical goods that you purchase, that electrical goods are safe for use in Australia. Of course, that includes the territory. It enhances the safety obligation of electrical entities. They're people that provide you with electricity, power and water. There's also, I think, a general electrical generation network out in Gove and more remote communities at Jimco and the like. And it also provides for the appointment of an electrical safety regulator. For the moment, that is me. The final slide about key features, established electrical safety board. And what the board does or is supposed to do is to provide the industry and community a chance to develop strategies for improving electrical safety, participate in national forum in relation to electrical safety, as well as developing the licensing and disciplining of people who perform electrical work if or as required. The role of the board is also to promote community awareness about electrical safety and also have our say in requirement for electrical safety of electrical equipment. One of the important committees, and the only ones presently set in the Act and the regulation, is the Discipline Committee, and that comprises of 4 members. The chair is a legal practitioner, and that committee exists for the purpose of applying or sanctioning penalties where the regulator has found someone who may be guilty of a discipline or a breach. So they have an important role in ensuring compliance with our standards and the requirements under the Act for electrical work. As you can see, the people that make up the committee represents different sectors of the electrical industry. That is also reflected in the board. As the regulator, I chair the board. There is a total of 8 members, and again, there are representative of employer of electrical workers on the board, a representative of electrical workers, a representative of the industry, a representative of the territory, and so on. The chair of the discipline committee is also a member of the electrical safety board. So that's a new structure and a new discipline committee which has never existed in the previous legislation, which was the Electricity Reform Act, that largely no longer have a role moving forward. So they're the key features and purposes. I'd like to now move on to how the legislation would affect homeowners and the general public. So dealing first with the electrical safety duty of homeowners. If you own a home, regardless if it is a house or unit, and provided that it's supplied with electricity from either the power grid or by renewables, your home is considered an electrical installation. And as the owner operator of an electrical installation, you will have a safety duty under Section 31 of the Act. So that means that as a homeowner, you'll have to comply and operate, maintain your home in that sense, in accordance with the legislation. And in doing so, one of the primary focus or requirement is that your home is safe from electrical risk and is safely operated and maintained. So either you're connected to the grid or a bit of both. Solar panels are, of course, the flavour of the decade, as it were, as we all are encouraged into more effective and environment-friendly solar renewable energy, as it were. So you have a duty, and breaching that duty could have consequences under the Act. Unless I think you're completely off grid and not in any way using or likely to be exposed to electricity, you are likely to have a duty under the new legislation. So in terms of increased consumer protection, there are additional tools for our electrical safety inspectors. So in NT-WorkSafe, we have a team of specialised services inspectors in electrical safety. And again, this is new under our legislation. What our inspectors are now permitted to do if they should come by and look at your electrical works that's been carried out on your property, if they have concerns about compliance and whether or not something needs to be further looked into or rectified or added to, they can issue an improvement notice. So the improvement notice is a written notice issued by an inspector requiring a specific issue to be fixed, to be made compliant, as the terminology goes. The notice does set out what is wrong, why it's wrong, what needs to be done, and makes recommendations to the worker or electrical provider of that works to remedy the concern. And it also sets a time for the fixing or the compliance to be achieved. I should indicate that anyone who doesn't comply with an improvement notice is guilty of an offence. It is a requirement to comply with these notices, and it is an infringible offence, which if an infringement is issued, it will cost the person that the notice is directed to a fine, a significant fine, around thousands of dollars, depending on the nature of the non-compliance. The other tool that is available to the regulator is rectifications directions. So that's a direction that's given by me. It's not a direction that my inspectors presently have to issue. It really is to address more serious defective electrical work where perhaps there's a level of urgency or seriousness that requires a rectification direction to be provided, or if there's repeat non-compliance with improvement notices by a particular provider, that a rectification direction may come from the regulator. Again, non-compliance is an offence, and the fine or penalty for that non-complying with a rectification direction, I believe, is larger than an improvement notice. So they are tools that are available to the regulator and inspectors to make sure that electrical work that is provided to the community and the general public are up to the standard that we expect them to be. or that complies with the wiring rules in the legislation as well as the applicable standards. The other way that we are trying to promote consumer protection, of course, is by dealing with and providing the public and committee with the ability to make complaints or raise safety concerns, and be able to be dealt with through a disciplinary process for electrical workers. So consumers can make a complaint to the regulator. So complaints can be made in relation to a electrical a licensed electrical worker, and a licensed electrical contractor, apprentices and trainees, and also a complaint can be made in relation to a former licensed electrical worker and contractor as well. So it's the whole gamut of anybody who may have or is providing electrical work and services. So when a complaint is made, the regulator would be the one to consider the complaint. I may or may not investigate the complaint depending on the nature of the complaint. If I believe the complaint to be vexatious, frivolous, or there are no grounds, then I may decide not to deal with the complaint. If I do consider the complaint, I am required to make sure that the complaint is provided to the person complained of. That person is given the chance to respond, and then I have to make a determination on the complaint, and the outcome is advised to the parties, and where appropriate, I will provide reasons for the determination of the complaint. If I find that the complaint has been proved, or someone has behaved inappropriately or contrary to the requirements of the legislation, I can refer that person to the discipline committee for further action. So in terms of what the discipline committee can do in receiving such a referral for disciplinary action, they may cancel, amend, or suspend a license. They can disqualify someone from holding a license. Those two particular sanctions is it's very serious, because of course it just means that the person can't work, and it removes an income stream for them. So it will probably apply to serious contraventions. The other, I suppose, lower level of penalty would involve the license holder being cautioned, fined, or ordered to rectify the fault or the non-compliance in the work that has been provided. In terms of a fine as a penalty, the fine is, of course, a debt that can be recovered to the territory. So all of those things are designed to encourage initial and ongoing compliance with the requirement for electrical work in the territory. So there's also an electrical equipment safety scheme. I think this has been around for a while now in Australia generally, but the Act now formally recognises the regulatory compliance mark. And if, as I've indicated before, if you purchase products with the compliance mark, it means that it complies with the Australian standards. Such items include portable electric tools, battery chargers, dishwashers, ovens and toasters, and residual current devices. So they're sort of the more home domestic type appliances, as opposed to large scale commercial electrical equipment. If you want more information about the electrical equipment safety scheme, they are on the internet, and if you type that into Google, it zooms you to the site if you need more information. But it's a useful thing to bear in mind if you do in the market for some compliant electrical equipment. So moving away from that topic, most of you may recognise this photo from the remnants of Cyclone Marcus. So one of the other particular changes introduced by the legislation is vegetation management requirements, and the rationale behind why these have been introduced or why it's been put into the legislation is to, as much as possible, make sure that overhead electrical infrastructure in common areas are as protected as they can be, and to minimise any disruption that may result from private gardens or trees and vegetation growing from private properties. You'll recall that as a result of Marcus, there were areas of Darwin and Palmerston without power for up to 1 or 2 weeks. And prior to 1 July, the electrical supplier entity really had to rely on the goodwill of homeowners to make sure that their vegetation in control and unlikely to interfere with overhead power lines or structures. And previously, those entities' representative can only enter private property for electrical work, usually with the consent of the landowner, or if they obtain a warrant from the court. So that has changed, and what replaces that in a way is that as a regulator, I can publish guidelines for vegetation management on private property. I can tell you now, still working on those. I haven't yet published any guidelines, although Power and Water and any other electrical entities, supplier, would, I think, have on their website what is recommended that you do if you have a big block or you have a very luscious and vegetation-oriented block, to try and keep your garden in control that will not affect the overlying structures. Obviously, it's tended to not interfere with your quiet enjoyment of your property and how you want your garden to look like. However, it does transfer the obligation to manage the vegetation on your land and your property to you as the homeowners. So you have to be aware that if your palm trees or your higher level vegetation is starting to encroach on the power lines, then you have a duty to try and make sure that they are cut back, and that they don't or that you limit what vegetation may be planted in the overhead infrastructure, so as you don't have to fix them at a later time, as well as having regard to your curbside vegetation and plants. So that previously the electrical entity has the duty to manage vegetation overall. Now part of that is shared with the homeowners. If or when I produces guidelines for vegetation management, they will of course be published on our website. So in terms of vegetation management, the Act also provides that now, moving from 1 July this year, if a homeowner doesn't maintain their garden and vegetation to keep safe overhead power lines and structures, then the owner may be provided with a written notice from the electrical entity to do some remedial work on their property. And if the work is not done, then the electrical entity may enter to do the work with or without the consent. There is a power for the homeowner to seek to have certain aspects of the written notice reviewed by the NT Civil Administration Tribunal. So the certain aspects that's subject to review is the process and the type of work that's required, not whether the work needs to be done. Okay, so it will be difficult for you to challenge the need to actually do the work. What the NT-CAT may preside over is how the work is to be done, what compensation, what costs involved may be shared or payable, and when, how to schedule that work can be negotiated rather than the actual remedial work itself. Okay, so just be aware that if the work needs to be done, it will be done, but you can negotiate how it can be done and when and what sort of compensation, if there's been any loss to the property or damage, might be negotiated. Okay, in terms of regulations to homeowners and the general public, can I indicate that when I did this this topic prior to 1 July, there was a lot of concern in terms of what we are trying to achieve by way of these changes. And as a result of feedback prior to 1 July, and in order to give people some more time to get used to the changes that are required to make sure that the electrical industry isn't overrun, and for people to have a plan to do these things. The bulk of these regulations or requirements, the commencement is delayed for just short of 2 years now to 1 July 2026. There's one aspect that's even later. So while I'm talking about these now, they are not in place. You don't have to rush out and do anything now. But please don't leave it to the 31st of May 2026 or 30th of June 2026 and you'll think, oh my God, I haven't done it. So I had committed in my previous seminar that we will try and remind people as we're going along, as we're approaching 1 July 2026, to make sure that they're aware of the changes. Again, the purpose of the changes is to make sure that our homes, because these are primarily for your homeowners, are safe from electrical safety risk from the point of sale moving forward. Okay, yes, I think that there may be certain homeowners that won't be captured by these provisions, but it is a start that we are hoping to make sure that homes in the NT, as much as possible, is safe for electrical risk. And one way of doing that is to capture that when, as a homeowner, you next sell your property post 1 July 2026. So the first requirement, so when you are looking at putting up your property for sale, as part of that sale process, you will have to provide when you're advertising or when you're negotiating a sale, a written notice to the prospective purchaser that sets out electrical safety risks that exist on your property. I will go into some details and give some examples of the electrical safety risk. What it's designed to do is to make sure the buyer knows what they're buying, and if there are risks on the property that needs to be looked at, that it's front and foremost in the buyer's mind. It's been compared to many years ago when you had to provide notification of fencing around pools for the sale of property. It's similar to that. It's sort of the proactive work to try and make sure that people are aware and that they do, as a buyer, if you're buying a property that has these risk, then the buyer has the duty to rectify the risk where reasonably practicable. Okay, so they don't sort of say, oh, I bought it and I didn't know this, so I don't have to do it. So that's what it's designed to do. So examples of electrical safety risks, these are listed in the regulations, and we are hoping, well, the purpose is that you should not have to engage as the homeowner, bearing in mind the costs involved in selling your house, that you wouldn't have to have an electrician to identify these electrical safety risks. For example, aerial service lines, so your overhead power lines, if you have a pool, a spa, or anything like that that is under an overhead power line, that is seen as an electrical safety risk. So in your notice, you will say, yes, I have a pool under the electrical power line. In relation to this notice, we are developing a standard type notice, and we'll publish that on our website that people can use to make it a bit easier for them, closer to 1 July 2026, because we don't want to confuse people beforehand, that you can fill out the property, and hopefully tick the box, cross the boxes, whatever you need to fulfill the vendor's obligation to provide such a notice. Okay, so if you have one of those, the pool underneath the electrical power line, then you'll need to tick yes to that, or no, as it is, to provide to the prospective buyer. Another electrical risk is that swimming pools and hot tubs should not be within 3.5 meters of a pool, 1.5 meters if you have a hot tub of less than 5,000 litre capacity. I wondered why this was so, because I'm not an electrician by trade, and I'm ably and confidently informed by my electrical inspectors, especially in the Territory, that water vapours from the pool or hot tub may build up, float towards the meter box, and actually affect or damage your meter box if they're too close to it. So hence that's why that is seen as an electrical safety risk, because a damaged meter box has a lot of other possible significant consequences for electrical safety, apart from the pool, of course. And then there are specific requirements for what is in your meter box. So, for example, there should be proper labeling in your meter box, that there should be no holes in your meter box, because holes means people put their fingers in it and you can get electrocuted, or you can suffer an electric shock, especially if the meter box is reachable by little people, for example. There also should not be any exposed melting bolts for metering in the meter box. So again, those things, usually as a person, a homeowner, not an electrician, dare I say, as a girl myself, I should be able to see and mark or tick as whether or not they exist on your property. Another electrical safety risk relates to the earth stake, and what is required in relation to an earth stake is that it should be protected mechanically, so it's not interfered with, and it should be labelled. The location should be marked on the switchboard, and the terminal point should be painted with a particular type of paint. That really, I suppose, in a private property where you have a house, you might have to go rummage around to find your earth stake. In apartment blocks, I presume that the body corporate could identify that for you. So again, that's something that can visually be checked hopefully by the homeowner. So they were just some of the electrical safety risks. So that was the written notice. And the other thing on the written notice deals with safety switches. I've been asked, why is there such a focus on safety switches? I have to say, I have been a very bad electrical consumer and quite blasé about safety switches, and not appreciating their importance in their ability to save lives, until I looked into it more and found out that, of course, safety switches are arguably one of the most reliable and cost-effective life-saving devices. There's a lot of literature on safety devices, on safety switches, especially on the Masters Electricians Australia website. Is an effective way of preventing life-threatening electric shock, and it is more easily sort of installed and used to save injury, as it was. So from 1 July 2026, again, note the delayed start. A seller of a property must provide the purchaser and the regulator at NT WorkSafe with a written notice that sets out safety switches on all general purpose socket outlets. So your power points, your general power points on your walls, they should all have a safety switch on it from 1 July 2026. If there is missing, some power points or outlets are missing, then the buyer, once they have been advised, they then need to install the safety switches on this power points general circuit outlets after they've purchased and taken possession of the property. Again, 1 July 2026 for that. And then this is the 1 July 2028 requirement, so just under 4 years away. From 1 July 2028, it's not just the power points. You'll have to have safety switches on all other circuits on your property, because there are other electrical circuits besides your power points. And similarly, if there's anything missing when you've bought a house or property after 1 July 2028 as the purchaser, you will have to install safety switches on all circuits where they are not installed. So again, if you are a owner of a property and you are planning to sell in the next 2 years or later, consider changing through to power points that have safety switches, either periodically. Obviously, I understand the cost is involved, but this is, for safety and to ensure in future that all property is as safe as possible and armed with safety switches wherever possible. So I suppose the take-home message, if you are a seller or a renter or a landlord of residential premises, then there is also a requirement from 1 July 2026 that all safety switches on rental properties have to be tested no later than 30 days after the start of a tenancy agreement. Okay, I've put in the slide a couple of internet references on how you can test safety switches, because I've been asked, well, do I need an electrician to test safety switch? I don't think so. I have attempted, and if I can do it, anyone can. I have tested my safety switch. What it does mean is that when you test it, after you've tested and turned everything back on, you've got to go and reset all your clocks on your oven, your microwave, and whatever else, your air conditioning. That was more annoying than actually testing the safety switch. Again, of course, this requirement is July 2026, and of course, if if fault is found with the safety switches, then of course they have to be replaced by the landlord. Again, this is something that probably, if your property is managed by a property manager, is what they will need to do on your behalf. And when I was talking about this requirement pre-July, some property manager says, oh, well, we'll need to make sure we incorporate that in our usual meet and greet or handing over the keys to the property to the new tenants. There's a raised hand. Emma, is your hand actually raised?
Yeah. There's just a question in the chat from Duncan about, are the RCD rules for domestic installations or for commercial installations as well?
They're for domestic installations. The commercial buildings for work and what have you, they're covered by the Work Health and Safety National Uniform legislation. And so what I'm talking about are strictly for residential at this stage. Okay, but I can deal with that if you've got how is testing recorded? I think I seem to have lost my chat feature, Emma.
Oh, do you have your options at the top?
It's okay. I'm opening up. Found it. I closed it too little. So sorry, everyone. I closed it. How is testing recorded? How is it ensured it will be completed correctly? So, how is it recorded? I suppose you would, if you were doing it on your own, you would sort of have a note about tested on this day, did this, did that, everything was fine, and you'll keep that note. How do we ensure it's completed correctly? So, in terms of the notices that you have to provide to the purchaser and the regulator, obviously, as the regulator, I don't have enough inspectors to check every notice that come in. So what would happen, I anticipate, is we would randomly pick out X number per month or, per period of time. My electrical inspectors will go out and just check and make sure that everything about the RCDs that has been recorded and that has been notified in their notices are correct. So it's not a foolproof system because, as I said, can't go to every house in the NT, but we'll be doing sort of random and just a random selection of notices that we receive to check within the other work that my electrical people have to do. I hope that answers the question. If not, keep typing. I've now found my chat function. I'll just keep going, mindful of the time and okay. These are just tenant requirements. It mirrors what the landlord has to do. So even the tenants will have to check their safety switches. Again, I've been said, well, how are you going to monitor that as a regulator? I think with great difficulty. But it is what has been recommended, and hopefully tenants can do it. And obviously, if your tenancy is for less than 12 months, then they wouldn't have to check it. I think the idea there is if its fault has been reported, it's important for the landlord or the property manager to make sure that the fault is rectified. Okay, so that's just again the rental property, a summary, the emphasis being on the timing, safety switches for power points, general outlets, circuit outlets, as opposed to all other electrical circuits from 1 July 2028. And also from 1 July 2026, electrical workers must install a safety switch before doing any other work. This requirement is really intended to ensure that properties that may not be transferred or rented would also come in line with the safety switch requirements, and is hoped to then capture the homeowners who are neither selling nor renting their property. So it's hopefully will capture more residential premises that don't fall within the sale or rental category. And as indicated, owners and occupiers of commercial properties are not governed by this act, but by because they are people conducting business or undertaking, and they're covered by the Work Health and Safety National Uniform Legislation Act. I can see there's another. What circuits must they install the safety switches on? Can I come back to you on that one, Daryl, Adrian? I see you're online. I may need you to tell me about circuits for the safety switches. Come back to you. Look it up, please, or you probably know already. Adrian and Daryl are my safety and my electrical inspectors who jump online just to make sure that I get it right when I'm telling you electrical information. They don't really trust me deep down. I'll come back to that if I may. Let me just whip through these and then I'll come back to the last two questions on chat. Oh, Rain, Brooke, last three questions on chat. Okay, solar PV installations. These are in force now, and I think you would all certainly. I know that WorkSafe has provided a lot of sort of guidance information on our website about the exclusion zone for solar PV in inverters and the requirement for a non-combustible barrier to separate inverters from walls. you would all have had news about various home fires that may or may not be related to solar batteries and solar battery installations. So it's important to have those fire protection requirements in place on your property to make sure that it's safe, and make sure that the area around your solar battery is not cluttered or not prone to catch on fire if the battery does heat up and combust, as it were. Energy storage system, as I said, same sort of exclusion zone around the energy storage system. Don't keep your storage around there if possible, because they can be caught. And also the same non-combustible barrier is required to separate the energy storage system and the walls. Again, 1 July 2021, if you should have a freestanding systems, then that is less than 2.5 meters from the ground, you'll need a safety enclosure. The purpose of that is to make sure that people don't access it without authority, or somehow deal with your standing system, and also make sure that wildlife don't inadvertently go in and add to your freestanding solar PV installation systems. Yeah, energy storage systems. There are fire safety requirements in terms of smoke alarms that needs to be installed. Thanks, Adrian. Adrian's put something in the chat in response to one of the questions. Smoke alarms need to be installed, needs to be located above or close to the energy storage system, so that it's, early detection, early warning, early notification could save lives, if not the building itself, if it should catch on fire. Again, that requirement comes in July 2026. There's also signage and registration requirements for PCBU. That's the more commercial people conducting a business or undertaking. So if they do have any of those items in their building, then they need to have proper signage, and the installations or storage system needs to be registered with the NT WorkSafe as the NT regulator. That is in July 2026 again. And my very favourite topic, electrical vehicle connection point. Again, there are safety requirements, and this safety requirements does also, I think, apply to apartment buildings that may, that not just standalone dwellings or homeowners. So the EV signage and the smoke alarm tends to go hand in hand for obvious reasons. Okay, I'm at the home stretch. I have 12 minutes. Excellent. Just a very quick word about community groups and not-for-profit organisations. So a person conducting a business or undertaking known as PCBU is a person who conducts a business or undertaking, whether you're acting for yourself or with others, and also whether or not the business or undertaking is carried out for profit or gain. So obviously your community groups, your sports group, your not-for-profit organisations such as community service, community legal service centres, and the like, while they're not there to make a profit, they're still considered PCBUs. And as PCBUs, they then have a duty to make sure that if they are in control of electrical equipment, they must make sure that electrical equipment is safe. And if you are an individual that's part of a community group or non-for-profit organisation, if you're at a location where there's electrical equipment, you must take reasonable care for your own safety, as well as take reasonable care that that whatever you do doesn't affect the safety of others as a result of the use of electricity or coming in contact with electricity. I think why I point that out is that we've had a number of queries about community groups who may have meetings in community halls or who may go out, do your social barbecues or awareness week or that sort of things, which means that they are dealing with electricity and what they're doing can affect the safety of others, and to remind them that they still have a duty to ensure that whatever they're doing and their use of electrical equipment is as much as possible free from electrical risk to themselves and to others. So that's just a slight reminder that these groups are not exempt from having a duty because of the fact that they are community, not-for-profit oriented, and they don't make money out of their business or undertaking.